as the country continues to celebrate 30 years of democracy, award-winning producer and director Legend Manqele has compiled a new docu-talk series called 30 Winds of Change. The series delves deeper into the nation's transformative journey. Each episode features intimate conversations with influential figures, from political leaders to cultural icons, who have all played pivotal roles in shaping South Africa's past, present and future. Hosted by the acclaimed journalist Clement Manyathela, this is set to premiere on SABC 2 on the 15th of December at 9:30 p.m. Well, executive producer of the series, Legend Manqele, joins us now this morning ahead of the premiere. Legend, a very good morning. Thanks for joining us. Welcome.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to you guys and your audience.
It's an absolute pleasure, man. So how did the idea evolve from concept to, a docu-series? I mean, are there any key milestones in its development?
Yeah, I think, naturally we're always trying to, as creatives, as producers, we're always trying to reflect what's happening in our country at any given time. So my biggest thing was just how do we figure out a conversation that is serious enough for us to, I guess, look back and appreciate where we come from and potentially where we're going. Yeah.
And how does this conversation balance, historical accuracy and storytelling?
I think the storytelling, or rather the intent of our mission when it came to creating the show, was that we just wanted to hear from those who have been, I guess, prominent in the contribution of where our country is going and where our country is currently. So I think for me, it's always been about just hearing from those who are participating, and in some way, those who are participating have kind of been, beacons as we've grown as a country. So I've always felt like our stories can only be told by those who are telling it, and yeah. I think the biggest thing for me was that, picking the right people and across sectors, across the different sectors that we have in the country is quite important. And so, yeah, I think we've done quite the job in trying to get these people.
I can imagine. And as you just said, that you try to focus on those who've made a contribution to where the country is coming from the country is currently and where the country is going. And just considering the diversity of the voices in that regard, how did you come up with the idea or the conclusion that this one should be included? And what is the selection criteria for those voices?
Sure, I think there were, there's so many people in our country that do so well. There's so many people who've contributed, and I think the biggest thing was that we were going to come up with, a big number, and those who agreed would then be, kind of the people that we interviewed. There wasn't any specific thing that got us going. It was more just about those who've been visible in the past 30 years and those who are representative of who we are as a country. So I think as a team, as a production team, we had about 60 to 80 names that we called, and those who were available, they were essentially interviewed.
Okay, so basically this series is driven by the interviews, not necessarily the storytelling element.
It's driven by a lot more than just, I guess, the interview or the story. It's driven by the reason why. It's driven by the contribution. It's driven by the intention. Because the intention for 30 Wins was that we celebrate our country, the good and the bad. And so, the reason was much bigger. And as a production, we always say we really just want to be able to reflect where the country is at currently, where we come from, and where we're potentially going. Yeah,
and just looking at the trailer that you've just played, and just looking at the caliber of guests that have been on this show, what role did the transition from apartheid to democratic South Africa play in the series? And can you highlight any moments that encapsulate this monumental shift?
Yeah, I think the intention for me was that we always used to learn in school, whether it was history or whether it was just amongst pupils talking. We always saw the country as something that was like coming from this dark place. And there were no reference points or interviews of those who were living during that time. And so for me, again, that intention was quite clear, to just figure out what happened, are we getting better, who are we currently? Is there a future? Because sometimes when you watch the news, it can all really spell out like this really dark place.
Very depressing, hey?
Yeah, that's messy and chaotic. And I think those who really participate in our country are awake to the opportunity of our country and are awake to the actual story, you know? So you'll see the guests truly have, I mean, if you look in Vundla, who's contributed such, you know, like such a big, in such a big way, because a lot of people, when they reflect on generations, he created generations, they always say, that's when I knew I could achieve, that's when I knew that I could dress up and own myself and own my story. And so I've always felt like, you know, their contributions are, you know, in there somewhere are lessons for us, the young people of this country that can take forward. Yeah.
And how do you think 30 Winds of Change will sort of resonate with the diverse fabric of South African communities? I mean, those who were born before apartheid, those who lived through apartheid, and the so-called born frees.
My hope is that there's an education here. Okay. My hope is that there's some sort of understanding that where we come from hasn't been easy, but we come from somewhere, and that we can draw from that as we move forward. And I think that should resonate with any participating citizen of the country.
So it's basically a historical record with a more forward-looking message, isn't it?
Definitely. I think the stories of old, or the stories of where we come from, are quite seminal for where we're going, you know. And I think it's very important for us to know about those who have carried us, so that we can carry those who are coming before us.
And I would imagine it must have taken you months to conceptualize this particular project. And having worked on it, how has it changed your perspective of, you know, South Africa's democracy and where we're coming from?
It definitely, you know, the idea came quite easy because of where we are as a country currently. But working on it was definitely arduous, and I think the biggest thing for us was trying to get the guests that we don't necessarily normally see on our mainstream TV or media. And so for me, it was genuinely just about making sure that, you know, we get the right conversation at the right amount. And I think, you know, it has taken months because it was an election year as well. And most of these people aren't necessarily always available. They're quite busy. And so their schedules and fitting into their schedules was quite tough. And obviously our presenter or our host for the show, Clement, is also quite busy himself. So, you know,
why was he, you know, the best fit for this role?
I think he's had a really good election year as a journalist, but I've seen his interview style, and I've seen how he's necessarily interacted with our potential guests as well. So I found that that would be much more comfortable to get somebody like him. But the caliber of work that he's done has been absolutely amazing and attractive to me as a producer. Yeah.
Is there any particular moment from the story or from this series that you know, particularly moved you or changed your perspective of the country's journey?
I think, you know, it's always interesting to see personas in person and in the media. So if you look at Helen Zill, for instance, we interviewed her at her home. And she's quite an avid teapot collector. No one would know that, and I felt like that was such a special thing to be let in on, you know? She's a grandmother. She's literally living a normal life. She's just got a very keen interest in, you know, her agenda for the country. And I think that for me was inspiring to see that, you know, we are still human at the end of the day. And, you know, in our daily habits, we mean well. So a figure like that who looks strong, who looks very, very determined to get her way, collects teapots and enjoys tea in the afternoon.
Who would have known?
She just felt like a grandmother to me, and I felt so so challenged by the two things that I was comparing, you know. And I felt some business leaders, because we were interviewing people in their homes, we were interviewing people in their offices, and I think we don't have the full story of these people. But equally, I think as somebody who is also trying to leave a great deposit in the country, I'm absolutely inspired by everyone's contribution. Everybody has some sort of focus, and it's inspiring to me as a producer, and I hope it inspires a lot of those who wish this country well.
Unfortunately, we're out of time, but it premieres tonight at 9:30, eh?
At 9:30 at SABC 2.
So I would imagine social media will be ablaze with, a variety and a multiplicity of conversations. So what is that, or what are you hoping people will converse about after this?
My work has always been about just bringing the mirror to the forefront. And for them, for everyone to look at themselves in the context of the show. So I really do hope that there is an engagement, but beyond that, I really hope that the families of this country get to be proud of what we've done, because we're all working together at some level. Whether you're a teacher or a nurse or a doctor or a businessman, we all need to be functional for this country to be functional.
All the best, man. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, man.
Great stuff. Well, 30 Winds of Change premieres on SABC 2 tonight at 9:30. Well, celebratory reflection on South Africa's 30 years of freedom. We just spoke to the executive producer, Legend Manqele.